Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on November 18th, 2024. This meeting included comments and discussion about awarding a construction contract for work on Miller Avenue, allowing childcare centers and private schools in more areas of the city, and regulating the placement of solid waste carts away from bike lanes. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on November 18th, 2024. All agenda items were approved unanimously. This was the first regular council meeting for new member John Malik from Ward 2. Malik replaces former council member Lynn Song, who chose not to run for re-election. You can find detailed information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included an update from Maura Thompson, Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. She discussed a program for public art called Elevate.
So round one of our Elevate projects include a scavenger hunt throughout our downtown. We are working with David Zinn on having 10 installations in place by spring. We have a sunshade project at the Farmers Market Plaza. We also have a large wayfinding project that will help people navigate from the Ann Ashley parking structure to Carytown and the Farmers Market. We also have a mural project at Liberty Park Plaza, but what I really wanted to talk to you about tonight is a mural project on Ann Street where we would like to honor the historic Black business district that existed along this corridor. So what we want to do is really elevate that history and install murals along Ann Street honoring some of these entrepreneurs and community leaders. So what you're looking at here is looking east on Ann Street, and you can see the fire station side of that wall, kind of a great canvas for a mural or two. The City Hall property where we are right now has some great space. And then looking west at the end of the street, you've got the Ann Ashley parking structure.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for about 10 minutes. 7 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 5 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 11 items and expenditures of $21.6 million. Nothing was pulled for discussion, but commenters and council members made remarks about CA4, a $6.3 million construction contract for water main and stormwater management work, as well as resurfacing at Miller Avenue. Miller Avenue runs from downtown to North Maple, alongside residential neighborhoods and West Park. The plan for improvements includes a 2-way bike track from First Street to North Maple. In a video produced by the city, staff explained that Miller Avenue is too narrow to allow for standard bike lanes on both sides of the street.
Within the narrow area, that 30-foot section, the existing roadway has 2 vehicular travel lanes as well as 2 side-running bike lanes that are striped. The concept for this narrow area would be to combine those bike lanes together on the south side of the street and double the buffer width in order to separate it from the motor vehicle traffic. In this narrow buffer, we are considering using a product called Quick Curb that provides both horizontal and vertical delineation of that buffer area.
At this week's meeting, public commenters spoke to the issue.
While I understand the concerns some have about this being a 2-way cycle track versus separate 1-way cycle tracks, staff has made clear that there's no room for the latter, and this is going to be way better than the painted bicycle gutters that are there now.
I'm comfortable using the unprotected bike lanes, but I regularly have conflicts on Miller with cars, particularly when approaching 7th Avenue, and I believe the protected bike lane and the reduced speeds are going to help improve these interactions and make Miller safer and more accessible for everyone.
Just recently, me and an all-tech mechanic service person got into it on the road because they were coming up behind me on Miller at the intersection of 7th and Miller, and that caused a bit of they didn't know what to do because the bike lane vanishes and we all merge together. And I'm hoping that a separate bike lane would help kind of solve that, in which now the drivers would know that we don't have to merge and get in those incidences of kind of conflict on the road.
Councilmember Iyer questioned the process used to evaluate bids for the project and award the contract to Fonson Company.
I'm really excited about it, but I did want to lament the fact that when hiring the contractor for this project, we were not able to use our best value procurement policy for the city, and I wanted to invite our city administrator just to give a brief explanation as to why we had to go with the lowest responsible bidder, which is not the best practice for our city anymore.
The CA4 had an element of ARPA funding in it, which is federal, and because of that, it requires that you go with the low bidder.
The Miller Avenue project is subject to federal procurement guidelines because it relies on federal funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. Federal guidelines dictate that contracts be awarded to the lowest responsive or lowest responsible bidder. Councilmember Iyer referred to the best value standard, which is used to award city contracts in Ann Arbor. The best value standard replaced a long-standing policy of awarding city contracts to the lowest responsible bidder. Since 2021, low price is now weighed equally against new scoring categories like workforce development and sustainability and equity. Since adoption of the best value standard, city staff now regularly recommend contracts that cost much more than the lowest responsible bidder. Additionally, council members Iyer and Radina have argued that the best value standard permits them to award millions of dollars in city work to their own preferred contractors against the recommendation of staff. 3 times, Iyer and Radina have led a majority of council in rejecting staff evaluations in order to approve more expensive contracts with their own favored companies. Earlier this year, the city planned to complete the Miller Avenue project without using federal dollars. Contract bids were assessed under the best value standard. Applying the best value standard, city staff recommended that the job be awarded to E.T. McKenzie, not Fonson. The McKenzie bid was $500,000 more than Fonson's bid. Last month, the city changed the terms of the Miller Avenue project and solicited more bids. Fonson Company was the lowest responsible bidder. The consent agenda, including the contract for work on Miller Avenue, was approved unanimously. Council considered amendments to the Uniform Development Code. Zoning guidelines would be amended in order to allow childcare centers and private schools in more areas of the city. Council discussed it for about 3 minutes.
What we are doing is we will permit child care center as a primary use, not a special exception use, but it will be a use as long as you comply with all other regulations. You will have a right to locate a child care center in all of our all R1 single family dwelling districts, in R2A, R2B, to restore child care center use as primary uses in the research district, which was allowed prior to 2019 and discontinued, and to allow them in the office research limited light industrial zoning districts. This change will also allow private school uses, but allow those as special exception uses in the research and office research limited light industrial districts. With this change, neighbors would not be noticed if there were a child care center opening in their neighborhood, and there wouldn't be a public hearing unless the place, I'm sorry, that's, I think, quite good enough.
The amendments were approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, the amendments will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council considered an ordinance amendment to regulate garbage carts, explicitly prohibiting their location in bike lanes. Earlier in the evening, a public commenter spoke in support.
The new regulations for trash bin stuff is great. I know that the solid waste people have stickers that they will put on trash cans from time to time. I have not seen them be placed on repeat offenders consistently, so I sort of agree that that there's probably some sort of just logistics stuff that needs to happen to like make that stuff all work.
Council discussed it for about 5 minutes.
Basically, it says unequivocally that a curbside trash collection, the bins should not be in bike lanes, and then the details of which will be updated in the regs. You know, a lot of the places where this is happening have high turnover student areas, so people may literally not know what our regulations are, and so I think proactive use of the stickers, and then also understanding how we can be more proactive than reactive just to a complaint-driven process, because I think it's pretty clear that it's not meeting our needs.
The amendment was approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, it will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Finally, after a brief introduction, Council unanimously approved the appointment of Travis Redina as Mayor Pro Tem and order of succession. The appointment and order of succession will dictate who will act as mayor when current Mayor Christopher Taylor is unavailable. Council met in closed session for about 40 minutes to discuss specific litigation. In December 2022, 4 former city employees filed a complaint against the city. They are no longer employed by the city because they failed to comply with a mandate for COVID vaccination. 4 plaintiffs alleged discrimination, arguing that the city should have granted them religious exemptions. Earlier this month, the district court dismissed one of the plaintiffs from the case because he did not formally request a religious exemption. The council meeting ended before 9 p.m. with no further public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
There's, a need for additional education around this issue.
I still think that there's work to be done to educate.
We're not suggesting anything that is particularly should be a heavy lift in terms of communicating this to the public. So just kind of, ongoing reinforcement and education.
I learned an incredible amount in a short few days.
I also just want to uplift what Councilmember Briggs was saying about education.
So it'd be great to do an education effort on this.
I also hope that the city continues to educate as well.
I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm excited to jump in.